And it was below where the greatest revolution in naval warfare took place. With the widest range of types and capabilities of just about any aquatic vessel, submarines changed the dynamics of naval power forever. Experimentation with submersible craft dates back to the 16th century. But the myriad of engineering challenges posed by the underwater environment, from stability and navigation to life support and pressurization, meant that it was hundreds of years before viable designs were proven. And for this, much of the credit goes to one man. Considered the father of the modern submarine, John Holland was an Irish-born engineer who, in the late 19th century, built the vessel that proved the possibilities of underwater craft.
John Holland was an Irish-American who developed basically the modern concept of the submarine by understanding the buoyancy and the weight relationship and understanding how to make the submarine dive and return again safely to the surface in a consistent manner.
Combining an internal combustion engine for travel on the surface with an electric motor for propulsion beneath, Holland's prototype was the first vessel to run for any considerable distance while submerged.
It was that enabling technology of the propulsion that enabled both flight and also it enabled submarines.
The US Navy purchased Holland's model in 1900 and quickly ordered 6 more, inaugurating the first submarine fleet in the world. Today, what we know as the submarine owes much to the military, and the military was drawn to submarines for one reason: their ability to be weaponized. Named after the torpedo fish that hunts by delivering a stunning shock to its prey, the torpedo remains the most lethal anti-ship and anti-submarine weapon ever invented. While work on underwater missiles had taken place previously, it was English engineer Robert Whitehead that is credited with creating the first self-propelled torpedo in the mid-19th century. Fired from a tube above or below the water, Whitehead's torpedo used a 3-cylinder compressed air engine to travel towards its target. With its worn nose designed to detonate a charge of explosive gun cotton on impact, Whitehead's chief innovation was the addition of a hydrostatic valve and pendulum balance connected to the rudder, allowing the weapon to maintain a constant depth. The latter addition of a gyroscope mechanism allowed the torpedo to correct its course against underwater currents, greatly enhancing its accuracy. Devastating to ships and difficult to defend against, the torpedo was the ultimate naval weapon. And able to close into an effective range while undetected beneath the surface, submarines were the ultimate craft to deploy it. Thus, it was the torpedo that transformed the submarine from experimental oddity to fearsome weapon of war. And throughout the 20th century, there were perhaps no submarines more fearsome than the U-boat. German for undersea boat, these craft, like all submarines of the era, were more submersible ships than true submarines.
And the U-boats in the First World War and the Second World War were just continuations of the same technology and the same design and the same thoughts that Holland had.
Sinking beneath the surface to avoid airborne attacks and to conduct stealthy torpedo strikes on enemy craft. It was this underwater ability that made the U-boat so deadly throughout both world wars. The most significant of the U-boats was the Type 7, relatively cheap and quick to build. During the Second World War, the Type 7 formed the backbone of the German U-boat fleet, with over 700 produced. And it was this vessel that rose to prominence in the longest, largest, and most complex battle in naval history.
At the beginning of the Second World War, submarines were being deployed by the Germans to sink the merchant ships that were going from America to support the UK. And in fact, Churchill is quoted as saying the most dangerous thing for him during the Second World War was the Battle of the Atlantic.
The German U-boats, led by the Class 7, patrolled the Atlantic in dreaded wolf packs. With their small profile and tight living quarters for their small crew, The Type 7s were all about agility and armament. Running primarily on the surface under diesel engines, the Type 7 was capable of rapid crash dives, and this favoured manoeuvre saw them disappear beneath the waves in as little as 20 seconds. Here, their combustion engines could not be supplied with sufficient oxygen, and they switched to their less efficient electric motors. What was sacrificed in efficiency was gained in stealth, and listening from the depths with advanced underwater microphones, they set their torpedoes to sink dozens of warships and millions of tons worth of merchant cargo. But the tide eventually turned against the U-boats, and the hunter became the hunted. The breaking of Germany's Enigma code, along with new Allied tactics and weaponry that capitalised on the U-boats' limited underwater performance, rendered them little more than sitting ducks. In the closing stages of the Battle of the Atlantic, these craft came to be referred to as iron coffins. Developed in the years between the First and Second World Wars, the T-class submarine was the British Navy's attempt to command this new aquatic battlefield. Along with an enhanced hydrodynamic structure, the T-class subs carried twin 1,450 horsepower electric motors to provide a greater capacity for underwater performance. Nonetheless, along with other subs of the day, the T-class remained faster and more efficient on the surface. And here, the T-class ran on twin 2,500 horsepower diesel engines, with an increased fuel capacity to afford a wider range and longer mission durations. But the T-class submarine's real advantage was simple. It could fire more torpedoes. With 4 external torpedo tubes and 6 tubes built into the bow, it was the first submarine to ever carry such firepower. The design proved a success. Playing a major role for the Royal Navy in World War II, the T-class was upgraded during the Cold War to target Soviet subs, remaining in service until the 1970s. With submarines revolutionizing naval warfare from below, surface vessels needed to adapt to neutralize the threat. Employed by both sides during the First and Second World Wars, merchant ships carrying concealed weaponry were an early attempt to do just that. Known as Q ships, they were designed to appear as easy targets, luring submarines to the surface where they could attack via deck guns rather than firing their limited torpedoes. Even if struck by torpedo attack, Q ships carried a cargo of light wood in order to remain afloat, encouraging the sub to expose itself in order to finish off the apparently foundering vessel. When the submarine surfaced, the Q ship's panels dropped to reveal its own deck guns. Using the elements of surprise to overwhelm its otherwise superior adversary,